The time has come in history when we really need to think about corruption. Corruption is a hard thing to recognize. It can be very subtle. For example, you don't know, often it's hard to tell how long you should keep something in the refrigerator or the freezer or on the shelf. And the signs become obvious, but there's quite a period before that actual collapse of the vital energy in the thing. Now, we're not talking about corruption in a fruit or a vegetable is an inanimate system insofar as it's been picked or uprooted. And the process of corruption, that's something we're familiar with for inanimate objects. But for living objects, the process of corruption, of deterioration, of its loss of vitality and balance and integration and integrity, is a more difficult matter. When something that's supposed to be self-organizing and self-balancing, self-generative, self-evidencing, self-aware, isn't allowed to be itself. And that's a real problem for it. And because what we're really talking about is a part of a whole, something, it's a fancy word, but it's called a holon. And the whole means the whole thing, and the on means a part, like a proton or a neutron is a part of something bigger, a system. And a holon is something that is both the whole thing and a part of it. So we could talk about the brain in that way. I don't think it's really accurate, but it sort of represents the brain and the spinal cord, sort of represents the whole body. And neuroscientists often think of the brain as sort of the control center, so it's like a holon. Another example would be the external self. Is a holon. It's a whole. It's me. Here I am, head to toe. I have these senses, these hands. This is me. I have an identity. I do stuff. I'm aware. I'm conscious. And a holon has that attribute. That's important. But it's also a part. So this external self, called exteroception, is both a very powerful whole, a self-identity, but it's not the full body. This isn't the insides. And there's an inner self, another part that is also meant to be self-aware. Self-validating, self-actuating, and integrated at a mature, at the level of the whole. So that our inner self should really have this identity that it doesn't have a mouth and eyes and ears, but it has a kind of animal intelligence that's located in the axial body rather than the superficial, the surface body. Now, is it possible to know it? Is it possible to recognize it, to validate it, to touch it, to feel it, to move it, to squeeze it? It's a muscular system. It's a muscular awareness. It's a haptic awareness. Is it possible to squeeze the muscles? And yes, it is, of course. And to do so, we need to understand the bony landmarks. And these bones, these central prominent bony affordances, simply give us something to focus our attention on in order to activate the second self, the animal intelligence, the inner holon. And there's an emotional dynamic. That's the solution to the problem. And what's the problem? The problem is this bias in our self-image, where we think we're only the outside, and we don't make room for and give voice to the inside. That there's a part of us that we won't allow to be itself. And it feels bad. And it's the origin of all repression and abuse and prejudice. And the degeneration or the collapse, what was the word I used in the beginning? The corruption in the system. It's a living system, it's not a fruit. The fruit happily browns and melts back into the earth, but the fruit tree shouldn't. And so that living dilemma is the result of a level of attainment of self-awareness in the external system that isn't being granted to the inner self. And there we must understand there's an emotional dynamics. There's an emotional dynamics and overcompensation, a control bias that happens on the one side that insists on it's right. We're really having a problem here. I'm right, do what I say. Because we don't have time to argue. And you're nothing. And then there's the you that's the nothing, the inner self, that doesn't have all that power, big voice and intellect. And that's this inner animal wisdom that needs to be validated and lifted, raised, rather than put down. Because that is what it is. It is that beautiful part of us that we cherish, the inner system, the complexity, the self-aware, proprioception system, awareness of the self, proprioception. It's muscular, postural. And so, coming back to the double bind is this situation where there's one party that has power. At least one party that has power, and then there's a victim who's dependent and somewhat trapped in that situation. Think like a child in a family, or a worker, or a citizen, or a community member. They can't easily escape. And that victim is being given multiple contradictory injunctions. So, like, an example is the child goes to hug their mom and the mom steps away, like she's just appalled, like, don't touch me. And the child becomes dejected, and then the mother says, what's wrong with you? Aren't you proud of yourself? Don't you love your mom? You shouldn't be unhappy when you see your mom. It's natural to want to hug your mom. Why would you feel ashamed about that? And this is both a pathological relationship structure and a set of unconscious actions, but it's also an overt strategy that comes from having lost one's own self-awareness. The generative self-awareness in the model is the core, it's the deep node, it's the self. And so, getting back to the double bind, this multiple contradictory injunctions means that you can't do it. You can't show your love. You can't not show your love. And the little kid doesn't know what the hell to do. And he feels bad about himself because he's wrong. He's just, no matter which way he turns, he's wrong. And that's a double bind. So what's the solution? Very simple: empower the kid. So either just seeing the situation is an act of maturity that maybe isn't going to happen for the little kid, but can happen for us. And physical empowerment. Physical empowerment, not in the exterior, not to teach them karate, but a sort of a self-affirmation of the self by the self that can insulate the self and the larger whole from the corruption of its integrated generative function. And this is how, in living, complex, self-organizing, living systems, corruption can be reversed. Train like a bodhisattva.